All right. This is my late review of Insecure, Season 5, Episode 6. Tired, okay? And as you can see in the description, in the title, it should have been called Own Your Choices, because I think all the characters had to face up and own what they've done, not only in life, but also recently. Such as Nathan. Now, Nathan is in a barber shop with a bunch of other guys, and the shop's actually doing quite well. It's been promoted. They fixed it up. They got stuff going on. And there's something called barber etiquette where we don't steal customers, as they say. So Nathan is actually in the shop, and a couple of one barber's customers are complaining because they've been sitting there for like an hour and he hasn't shown up. So the customer is actually asking, can somebody cut my hair? Can somebody touch me up? And so Nathan actually agrees to cut a couple of the customers' hair. And everybody looks at him because they know it's going against the etiquette. And what Nathan says is, you know what, I'll go ahead and take the hit. So he cuts their hair. And later on in the episode, the guy comes in 2-3 hours late, and it's time to collect booth rent. And the brother walks in and says, they asked him, where's your rent? They said, Nathan got mine. Everybody's going, what? Said, yeah, Nathan got mine. He's stealing customers. And so they start throwing words back and forth, and they start throwing jabs at each other, almost get into a fight. But as they're saying in the whole episode, people got on their choices. And Nathan made a choice, and this is his result, and he's got to live with it. So now they're stressed at the shop. And it's going to show up later on when him and Issa actually have a discussion, because him and Issa had that discussion about him leaving the shop, leaving LA, and now all the choices that he's made have to come in and impact, what he's doing, his life in LA and stuff like that. And next we got Molly. Now Molly is on a retreat, because we see Molly on a retreat because Issa has come in and actually, to feed the family dinner. We see Molly on the phone, and she's on a retreat, or it's retreat because they have to brainstorm about new campaigns. And they're sitting around in the lounge, and Molly comes down, and they're drinking, and they're, how they're bonding, having this bonding time, downtime away from the law office. And they start drinking here and there, and they saying what their first impressions of each other were. And when it came to Molly, they thought Molly was a snob about DocuSign and other such things that the black law office didn't do, that her old firm did, and how they had a latte machine inside the office, and everybody saying, well, you need to take your ass down to Starbucks like everybody else. In other words, it's a black firm. It's not Beverly Hills, and you need to get with the program. Come down and be just like everybody else. In other words, fit in. And Molly realizes how much they didn't know about her, or how much of her mask, the code switching her mask that they thought was her. So in the sequence, they start drinking, and then next morning she wakes up and there's Skittles all over the bed and a man's watch. And her clothes are half off. So Molly thinks that, I passed out. I don't remember what happened the previous day. And there's Skittles and a man's watch in my bed. So she does the walk of shame. She gets dressed. She goes down, to the lounge, and she sees everybody there eating breakfast. So she walks over with the watch, and she's trying to say, I found this watch like far from my room in a hallway, and I want to know whose this is. And then her arch enemy, Torian, her rival Torian says it's mine. And then she looks at him like, did we? And he says absolutely not. And they pull up the video on the phone and says, you don't remember? And they show her twerking, and her drunk, and her twerking, and her twerking on Torian. And evidently she's gotten drunk. She's gotten kind of out of hand, and Torian has actually walked her back up to her room. So now the real Molly has come out, and And now she has to drop her mask because what did I say about climbers, especially 85 climbers or 87 climbers? Give them a couple of drinks, the real girl will come out. And Molly has done such a good job of putting that corporate mask on that nobody really knows her, but now they do. And later on, when her and Torian are actually giving a presentation, Molly's distracted because her brother keeps texting her, but she knows that her brother Curtis is in the hospital with her mother. So she thinks every time Curtis texts her that there's something going on with her mother. And she's distracted, so Torian has to basically take up the slack because she's distracted. So when they're talking out in the lounge area, later on, Torian's asking her, is there something going on because you're really distracted and it's not like you? And that's when Molly actually breaks down and actually tells Torian what's going on with her mom, that her mom's had a stroke. And Torian actually, gives her a similar story about his brother going through chemo. And he was all distraught the same way. So Torian and Molly find out that they each have something in common, that they're actually more alike than they are different. And she finds out that Torian actually has a human side. Torian's always this stiff, corporate, straight to the point brother. Well, I guess that's a Taurus, Torian. The no nonsense, but that's his mask. And she finds out that Torian's a lot more human because he said, he should basically work his work. The thing is, if you need anything, because we're all humans together, right? We're all people. And he said, if you ever need anything, you can always rely on me. And I think that's when the wall between Torian and Molly actually broke down. I think that's when Molly, the Molly that wants to change, actually came back, because we had seen Molly fall back into her old pattern. But I think the crisis of her mother being sick and her having to soldier on her job, I think that's kind of taken its toll. I think that's kind of melted some of the ice queen that Molly has had. It's kind of brought the mask down a little bit. You see that later on when she's in her room, her brother calls, shows that her mother has actually waken up out of her coma. And Molly has been worried that her mother would die without Molly saying that I love you. That's when we get the knock on the door, and Torian is bringing her a swag bag because they bonded. Now they realize that they were much more alike. And Torian comes to the door, and Molly's elated because her mother's waking up and she wants to celebrate with somebody. And Torian happens to be at the door. Now we don't know what's going to happen afterward. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen after, because they had that look, okay, over a coffee mug. Very awkward because they've been rivals. And it's awkward when you see a rival differently, because I know I've had that where women that I've hated, all of a sudden I've had romantic thoughts about. So I know that kind of awkward feeling. So we have to see next show what happens between Torian and Molly. That would be a shocker, personally. But let's get to Issa. Let's get back to Issa. Opening sequence, Issa is, instead of passing and walking by Lawrence and Condola and the baby, in this sequence, obviously it's a dream sequence, right? She walks up and she interacts with him. I wouldn't say confront. And first thing she said, are we going to pretend like this is not weird? And so that kind of breaks the ice, and they start talking. And then she bends over and she looks at baby Elijah and talks about how cute he is. And Condola offers to allow Issa to hold the baby. So Issa's holding the baby, little cute baby, and she's looking at Lawrence and Condola and what she can't have. And then in this sequence, she takes the baby like a basketball and shoots it into the laundry basket. And she says, F those kids. And then she drop kicks Condola into the laundry basket with the baby, and then asks Lawrence if he wants some. And then she walks off with a maniacal laugh. Now, this is Issa in her head in the dream sequence. She gets back to Earth, and she is looking through Lawrence's Instagram. Now, why you just let go of an ex and you're still going through his Instagram to catch up with him. And you find out that he's moved back to LA for his child. And you don't know how you're going to feel about that. You're disappointed because he moved back for the baby, but he didn't stay for you. And you can see the disappointment on her face. That's why in the next sequence, she's trying to throw her pain into the relationship with Nathan. And from the last episode, remember when she said that she loved Nathan. Now we know that the look on her face is like, I love you, but I love you because I need to love you. Not I love you because I do. Like treating Nathan like a placeholder, as Rhyme has said. And I think Nathan's kind of picked up on that because she's putting her extras into having sex with Nathan because she's trying to whip him into saying that he loves her. Whip him into committing to her like she thinks that she wants to be committed to. So she keeps hinting. There's something else you want to say? Do you love something else? Obvious. I'm sure Nathan kind of picked up on it too. But Nathan doesn't say it, and so she's resigned to it. So we see Issa walking into a business that she's been trying to convince to be the face of the next promo for her new company, the company that she's working for. MBW, nothing but water, right? The one she did with Crenshaw that kind of made a splash. So she gives the pitch and then realize who the company is, and they realize that this is the beef that's been going back and forth between Crenshaw and her. They don't know how to feel about that, so they tell her that they're going to get back to her. In other words, people like Issa actually depend on their reputation. And her reputation has been sullied, and so now the people in the neighborhood are not really engaging her like that. So she's got to go clear the air with Crenshaw. So she walks into his business with brownies in hand, trying to make peace. So she comes in and she tells Crenshaw that she wants to clear the air and she wants to have a talk, and they've said something back and forth and maybe they shouldn't have, and this stuff and forth. And Crenshaw says, when we first met, I thought we were in the trenches together. And when I had a vision about something, you didn't have my back. You sold, basically, in other words, you sold me out for the bag. And they were saying in his opinion, the community doesn't need a corporate person to come in just like white folks that they can't trust. And she needs to figure out what side she's on. So Issa's trying to make her pitch about how we're going to put all this stuff behind us so we can actually work together. And he says, I figured this is the first time we meeting face to face since the event, so you must need something. And he talks about the choices that she's made. And first thing he says is that those are your choices, you should own them. And this is consistent throughout the whole episode about choices that we make that we have to own. And that is the crux. That's the central part of it. That was the line that he had to deliver. Because when Issa is with Nathan again over at Nathan's house, well, before that, Issa has another dream sequence, right? She's at the food truck, and I swear, I think only one time I've ever seen Issa actually cook. And her in these food trucks in these restaurants, okay? These are modern women. They don't cook. Molly, who's a lawyer, who's corporate, has less time, has cooked more than Issa. But Issa's at the food truck. She's getting an order, and in this sequence, Condola comes walking up behind her. And she turns around and says, "Are you stalking me?" And she says, "No, we just have similar taste in food." And she says, "I'm not mad at you. I want to thank you for giving up." And she says, Lawrence is now making $1 billion a month. And Issa looks on her finger and there's this big engagement ring. I said, "Yes, we're engaged. And yes, this is not the mall ring that he was going to buy you. It's bigger. Even this cucumber is bigger." She said, "The long throat that you like?" She said, "Yeah, longer." And she said, "But I want to thank you for letting me have Lawrence." And they called Condola up, the order's ready. She said, "But I got here before you." She said, "Winners first." And he said, oh, one more thing. she does a roundhouse kick and knocks Issa into some garbage bag. So now that was a dream sequence that I guess Condola got her comeuppance. So the ending sequence is that she's in Nathan's kitchen. She brought him by some food and they're drinking wine, and he's telling her about the altercation he almost had with one of the barbers, with the barber that was late, because he didn't know whether he could be there and trust people. He didn't know if LA was such a good fit for him. And he was basically, he was just frustrated. And that's when Issa brought up the fact that she said she loved him and he wasn't committed to it. And she wasn't sure whether he was committed to them. And rightfully so. He said, are we really going to do this right now? He said, you didn't ask me about how I felt or what I just talked about. And she doubled down and says, yeah, but I said I loved you. You didn't say you loved me back. She said, well, I'm not sure that you're really committed to the relationship like I am. And he says, you know how I feel about you. Yeah, but he said, but you won't discuss it. He says, because you're all over the place. You're inconsistent. He said, 1 minute you say you love me, 1 minute, next minute you're crying in my mouth. Next minute you want to take it slow. And the next minute you say you love me. He says, you're all over the place. And when he confronts her, she doesn't want to, Issa's passive aggressive. She said, why don't we just drop it? And he says the same thing that Crenshaw said. You need to own your choices. So this is reverberating throughout the whole show. Own your choices. And I've been saying that about Issa forever, for the whole 5 seasons. Issa does not want to stand on her square. She thinks everybody's supposed to flip back and forth just like she does because she feels a certain way. And because she's not owning her choices, she's interfering with everybody else. She friend zoned Nathan for a year, and then she wants a commitment after a year after friend zoning him, but she wants to take it slow. But the thing is, whatever her needs are, she wants him to put her needs first, and she never thinks about the other person, which is the same thing that happened with her and Lawrence. Lawrence learned from his. He learned from the relationship that he had with Issa. Issa is never wanting to actually think about other people. Just like when, in the first season when she cheated with Daniel, she never really wanted to own the choice that she made. It's always whatever she feels at the moment. And I think hopefully the last 4 episodes, she can actually make that breakthrough. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But anyway, Insecure is getting it's kind of hard to actually review because the way they're writing it is a little bit scattered. I think they're trying to push a message through rather than tell a story. But that's my review of Insecure Season 5, Episode 6, Tired, okay? Own your choices. With that, I'm going to jump off here. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys